Hello. In our last video, we wrote our very first object-oriented program. And as we did that, as you see, we had our class and our main routine all in one file. As I alluded to in previous videos, this usually is not what you want to do. You don't want your classes actually being in your file. That defeats the purpose of object-oriented. Again, the whole idea of object-oriented is that it's shared among the masses, okay? And what I mean among the masses is based upon what the masses are. If you're dealing with Visual Studio provides you with this thing called a .dot framework that has tons and tons of libraries in it, in which those libraries contains objects which are shared to you, thus the text boxes and the buttons and all of those classes, okay? When we're dealing with business tier type logic, usually the mass is the programmers that you're working with within the enterprise in which you're working. I consider enterprise a company, okay? So if you're working for a Procter & Gamble, there's probably a library of sorts that's going to hold all your objects, okay? When I say, let me say this again. There's going to be a library that's going to hold all your classes, okay? And when you want to use those classes, you go out and search for them. It's called an object browser to go search for them. And then you will go instantiate them and so on. In Python, what you need to do, instead of instantiating them, you got to import them. And it's the same thing with the Visual Studio based type of languages too. You got to import those libraries in to be able to go and use them. So it's the same type pieces. So what I want you guys to get used to is when you're building your classes, you build a library you build what do you want to say, a file that has your classes in them. Later on, probably in the next week or so, we'll talk about what a package is, where a package is a combination of all these files. So instead of having to import each individual one thing, like say I want to bring in 10 different classes, instead of having the word import 10 times, I'll show you how that works here, you will have the word, you will have import the whole package, which will then import all the different ones. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But for simplicity's sake here, what we're trying to do is we're going to basically do something. Instead of sitting back and having our code in there, we're going to rewrite the code we just did, and we're going to import the employee class as imp, right? Employee class as imp. As is the piece there. You can sit back and you can call this anything you want, okay? You can employee class as employee if you wanted to, okay? And that's going to be what we're going to refer to the class at in our particular program. So instead of imp here and imp there, it'll be employee. All right. Now you might be asking, and you should be asking, where did the particular class go? Well, if you come over to my solutions, what I did is I developed an employee class right here. And here's all the information. It was literally a cut and paste. I did nothing else. It's basically I took the class and I made it into its own .py file. Does that make sense? This class becomes its own .py file. If you want to go create this, you will come back out here, do a right click. Oops, sorry, right click. Well, let's try it again. Right click, thank you. We're going to do add new item, and you'll see right here we're going to add a Python class. That's what we're doing here, a Python class. It's still a .py, so that's what this whole thing is. It's its own class. It's a .py file. If you actually said empty Python file, you put your class in there, it's the exact same thing as a Python class. Yay. There's that package. We'll talk about that as we get to it a little bit later on, and we'll go from there, okay? So a Python class. And that's what we did here. I just took all that information I had with my class right here that I cut and pasted that and stuck that into my employee class. Does that make sense? Okay. Then, I know I'm confusing you here. Let me go up here. I'm going to get rid of a few things. The only ones that were really without class, there you go, with class, there you go, should be these two. So your program should look like this, where I have my class and I have my employee, and whatever your name of your program is, without class. You don't have to say without class, but whatever the name of your application is. There should be two distinct things. Go ahead and name it like this, employee, and then the word class afterwards, so you know that that's the class module, okay? So what I did was I imported this class module, and it has to be the exact same word, whatever I saved it as, but I'm going to reference it as employee. If you notice in my code, a couple things happen. I have to reference the namespace, if you will, employee. I have to reference the class. So I have to reference two things here. Boom, boom. Okay? So if I called this something else, again, going back to imp, that was really bad, I can do it this way. So this came from that particular file. That's what we're talking about, okay? That particular file, and then this becomes the actual class itself within the file. And that's how you would reference that, a little bit differently. One more layer, because you're going to have multiple files, and that's what Python wants you to do. That makes sense. All right? If I run this thing, it should look pretty much the same. And there you go. Okay? And everything is cool. All right? So it basically runs, it just goes and it grabs it and imports it in. So, how many classes will you write? Well, in the course of the remainder of this course, hopefully quite a few. All right? How many classes will you bring into your program? It all depends. What do you need them for? Again, the whole idea is that you should have a library full of a bunch of classes, and then within that library, you bring in the classes you need, instantiate the use, the different methods, the different things you're doing, and that's how this whole thing's supposed to work. Okay? And once again, what we can do instead of having import, 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 we can have import of a package, and we actually define a package that brings it all together. We'll learn about that a little bit later. No big deal. Okay, just a little bit of a shortcut. Does this make sense? So if you're going to write an object-oriented program, it makes no sense whatsoever to have the class within your code. That defeats the purpose of object-oriented. Why do it? You might as well just have it all in your code and not break things apart. But the whole idea is sharing among the masses, sharing among all your peers, programming peers at the place you're working at. And in doing so, we would put this employee class out on a library that everybody can get to, and you actually bring it in. For the sake of this course, the library you need to deal with is the library for your particular project, and everything will work out fine. All right? And when we get to packages, you'll see how we can actually reference those packages logically and what's the other one? Logically and relatively, based upon where your programs are saved and so on. So we can do logically, I should say, absolutely, where we can actually say it's located on this file. That's where all the, more likely when you work at a place like P&G, you'll have one location for all the classes, and you want to put an absolute address in there. And we'll get into that when we talk about the particular package, okay? No big deal. All right, so this was a little video to do nothing more to show you how to separate your class from your program and how to import the class that you're going to reference within your program. I hope it's pretty simple.